All right, everybody. Welcome to the next episode of the Mic'd Up Outdoor Podcast. Today I'm with a good friend of mine, somebody who I highly respect and have respected for a long time. A gentleman by the name of Mr. Roger Sharp. Roger, thanks for coming on the show with us today. I appreciate it.
Yep.
Before we get started, I guess just tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, where you're from, and what you do for a living, or what you did for a living, I should say.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Humboldt, Iowa, and I was a river rat. Grew up on the Des Moines River, and basically I was starting as a young. I started fishing very young, and I basically cut my teeth on carp and bullheads and catfish.
Okay.
Yeah.
How old were you when you moved into Michigan?
Actually, I went to school in Wayne, Nebraska.
Oh, okay.
Got a teaching degree.
Okay.
And then I graduated in the middle of a semester, and I went through, back in those days before the computer, I went through the card catalog, and I started teaching in Richmond, Michigan.
Richmond, Michigan,
and
okay.
I originally was just going to start there and move back out. I spent some time in Colorado, and I really enjoyed that area. And health-wise, it was I had asthma when I was in Iowa, but I met my wife.
Okay.
And we were both teachers in Richmond, and then I moved to Clare in '68.
In '68, okay.
Right.
All right. What made you want to be a teacher?
Basically, I liked kids and got along real well with kids, and then I was not a very good athlete, but I was interested in the sports area.
Sure.
And so I became a phys ed teacher.
Oh, okay. All right.
And it was a great way for me.
Were you a phys ed teacher the whole entire time you were a teacher?
Right, the whole entire time. I was a primary physical education teacher.
Yep. That's awesome. Was Clare the first? Clare wasn't the first school that you taught at.
I started teaching in Richmond.
In Richmond. How long were you in Richmond for?
A year and a half.
Okay.
And Hilda, my wife, was a school teacher in Richmond, and we decided to move north, and I was a little more comfortable with the area up here in Clare area.
Yeah, Richmond is a lot more city-ish.
Right. I was within 4 million people within 40 miles.
Yeah, that doesn't make it very fun.
And anyway, it's really worked out well for us.
Yeah. So when you were young, who got you into fishing?
Basically, my parents, we would take family trips to the river. Okay. And
the Des Moines River.
The Des Moines River.
Yeah.
And to actually Okoboji, which is one of they call it the Iowa Great Lakes, Spirit Lake and Okoboji area, and fishing bullheads. Yeah. And then I would fish the river at home.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
That's how I basically got started.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a lot of friends that fished, so basically most of my early fishing was done alone, and consequently, as I progressed through the years, I still enjoy fishing alone.
Right, yeah. You're 81 years old now.
81.
That's awesome.
Well, I've been blessed.
I tell you, I tell a lot of people that I come in contact with, they ask me about, getting older and stuff, and I'm going to be 50 this year, and honestly, I look at you and I envy you from a standpoint of just how you handle yourself and how you stay young, even at 81 years old, staying active, doing all the things that you want to do and staying outdoors. And I think that's a true testament to feeling good and staying young.
Right.
Do you?
Yeah.
I mean, you
Oh,
agree?
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah.
Being outdoors keeps me active, and my wife and I are big walkers.
Sure.
Which
Sure.
helps. We don't miss many
You
days.
don't miss a day.
With out walking our 3 miles.
Right. Yeah.
And so forth.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. So when you moved into Michigan, how long was it before you got introduced to steelhead fishing?
It was a couple years. Actually, my next door neighbor was Dick Swan, and he was
Okay.
the pioneer of the noodle rod.
Yep.
A tremendous fisherman, had world renowned gentleman, and he was my next door neighbor. And when I moved into Clare, I gravitated to the river, Tobacco River.
Sure.
Goes through the Clare area, and I started fishing brown trout right
Yep.
away, and was quite successful at it. Being a river rat, I
Right.
knew how to read the waters,
Right.
and then I would talk to Dick, and he'd say, "Well, you better give that steelhead fishing a shot." And I said, "Well, okay, I might, take some time."
Sure.
But I finally went. It wasn't the first year or two, but it's somewhere in the 70s.
In the 70s.
70 or 71.
Okay.
I made my trip to the big river, to the Manistee, below the coffer dam, or below the dam,
Below the
Tippy
dam. Yeah.
area, and finally connected. He told me, he says, "You ever start steelhead fishing, this brown trout you will quit that." And I thought, well, no, I'll be able to brown trout after school, and then
Right.
and then maybe steelhead on a weekend or something.
Right. Were you familiar with steelhead at all at that
No,
time?
no.
Didn't know anything about them.
Had no idea
No idea what they were, or how big they were, or any information. So,
No.
so Dick kind of gave you a crash course in what it was all about.
He gave me a crash course, and of course I was full of questions, and I would go over and chat with him, and he was building rods at the time, so I'd watch him tie the guides on. It was, when he built a rod, it was all done. He didn't have machines.
No,
or nothing.
yeah, it was all hand spun and
right.
yeah.
And so it was interesting just to chat with him.
Yeah, he was, like you said, he was pretty world renowned. I mean, he was kind of the innovator of the whole noodle rod, I guess.
Light line fishing.
Light line fishing, yeah. I mean, he wrote books, and there was all sorts of publications about him, and so I mean, you had a pretty good mentor.
Yes,
I mean,
very good mentor.
Yeah.
Now, I didn't fish a lot with him. Even as time went on through the years, the most fishing I did with him was jig fishing. In August and in the first week of September, we'd go to Manistee Lake
for salmon
and jig fish them. I did steelhead fish with him a time or two every year. Now, not maybe some years I didn't even fish with him.
Right.
But we did do some jigging.
Sure. Like vertical jigging?
Vertical
out
jigging.
Of a boat?
Out of a boat.
Okay.
And,
okay.
And in those days, it was very good.
A lot of salmon.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In those days.
That would have been what, the late 70s, early 80s?
Probably mid 70s.
Okay.
I started vertical jigging for salmon.
Was snagging legal at that time?
Yes.
It was.
I went through the legals.
You went through the whole.
I didn't ever get involved in it.
Okay.
But
okay.
The snagging was legal.
Yeah.
At those times.
I imagine that Tippy Dam at that time, especially in salmon season, was like, we think it's a madhouse right now. I could only imagine what it was like when you could legally snag.
Right.
I know the times that I've been up there, and you always snag into something while you're up there fishing, and every year I find that I'll snag what they called an M80, which was basically a humongous treble hook with lead just melted right around it, and it was absolutely insane how heavy it was. I could only imagine the amount of just craziness that went on in that time when the snagging was legal. So I mean, you got a taste of the salmon and the steelhead at the time,
Right.
And you just kind of gravitated towards the steelhead more,
Right.
because they were more of a biter, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And no, I still fish salmon once or 1 week a year or so. I'll cast thunder sticks in the lower river,
Right.
and catch a few. But the minute I think I could catch a steelhead, I'm done.
Yeah,
with the
done
salmon.
with the salmon.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. I mean, I listen, I love fighting salmon, but I guess once you see them, what they look like when they come out of the Great Lakes, and what they look like when you catch them in the Great Lakes, there's two big differences there. I mean, there's definitely a.
Yes. Very different.
You're looking at something that looks as fresh as the new snow, or when they hit the river, they look as rotten as a boot.
Yep, that's exactly a great analogy.
Yeah. So right. I mean, the steelhead themselves. I mean, the salmon come in and they do their thing, and then they die. The steelhead, they come in, they spawn, and then they go back out to the lake. So I mean, there's that chance their mortality is different than a salmon.
Right.
So.
Right. Yep.
So.
No, that's.
Yeah. What? When you first started, I mean, you were specifically just a wader fisherman?
Yes.
Yeah.
Now, what changed me over to a boat person is in '89, Manistee River went to natural flow.
Okay.
And so I couldn't cross the river anymore. So before that, I crossed the river back and forth.
At the dam?
At the dam, and all the way down to the rock pile. I could go all the way to Suicide Bend and to the Tunk Hole, and I would fish the rock pile and on each side of the river, and so I had access to a lot of fishing ground.
Okay.
Well, in '89, when they went to minimum flow, you could no longer walk across the river.
Okay.
And so then I was confined to either one side of the river to the other, and not only that, you started having to use heavier line because you couldn't hold your fish and chase it like I used to. I used to catch a fish on, and by the time I landed it, I was 100 yards down the river.
Yeah.
And so forth. Well, those days were over with. You had to start fighting fish different and using heavier line, and I ended up buying a boat.
Okay. So when you say natural flow, so they used to, was it somebody that raised and lowered the water depending on how much water was up above the dam?
Right.
Okay.
Consumer Powers would, they were in charge of the dam. They owned the dam. And then their turbines, they would power them, and they'd run water twice a day.
Okay.
And they'd blow the siren, and the fishermen down below the dam would clear out of the river because they knew in 15 minutes that water was coming up. It would raise 2.5 to 3 feet.
Really?
The turbines would start powering up, and then they'd lower the water, and let the natural flow of the river build back up, and then they'd but it was causing erosion problems.
Sure.
And so they ended up in '89. The DNR forced them to only to go minimum flow. So as we get rains and stuff, then more water would flow. They could run the turbines longer.
Right.
But that's how it is today.
Yeah. So I mean, I know it can get really low up there, in the summertime, especially when we're not getting any rain. But that's an interesting fact. I guess I never knew that. So was it the same time every day?
Pretty much.
So you knew what you had if you were going across.
Right.
So,
and then I could hear the siren from clear down a mile down river or more. Oh, yeah, no. So you knew when the water was raising, you'd get yourself back across the river.
Right. So you were wader fishing up there. I guess, what was the traffic or what was the crowds like when you were steelhead fishing? I know salmon was crazy, but steelhead might be a different story.
Right. When the run was on, there would be anywhere from 40 people above the coffer and 25 or 30 people below the coffer.
Okay.
And in those days, now that's in the prime season. Now I would fish all winter long, and so there was many days in the winter time that I'd be the only person above the coffer or
Sure.
below the coffer, and so forth.
Yeah.
Now I've still fish opening day of deer season, and so I'm 40 or more years of being on November 15th. I've been on the Manistee.
You're the river guy.
I've been on the Manistee
Yeah.
River.
Yeah, and I know that just from personal experience that could be some of the best fishing
Right.
there is as far as steelhead goes.
November fishing for steelhead is the premier month
Yeah.
to be on the river steelhead. The fish are all fresh, and they're full of fight.
Yeah, they're full of piss and vinegar
Yes,
at that point.
they
Yeah,
are.
yeah, they're not there to spawn; they're there to feed.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, the primary time for a steelhead to spawn would be coming up on what we're dealing with right now, like mid March to the first part of April.
Right.
The water temperature's got to get to, what is it, 40? I can't remember.
40.
It's the low 40s. I feel like it might be 42, something like that, to, I guess, basically trigger a steelhead to, start spawning. So,
Right.
but so I know that you were a pretty accomplished steelhead fisherman back then. You held a record at one point, correct? A state record?
I did not.
Oh, you did not?
No.
Okay.
No, I never did hold the state record. I caught some fish that, yearly, that was the top fish on the river.
The top fish on the river,
but
okay.
not the state record.
Okay.
I never did hold a state record.
Okay.
Actually, my biggest steelhead was 18 pounds, 12 ounces.
Wow.
And I've caught 17 pounders and 15
Some big
pounders.
ones, yeah.
But, no.
Yeah, that's impressive. Now, those big ones that you caught, did you catch those that biggest one you caught? Was that at the dam?
Right.
It was.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was below the coffer dam.
Yeah. What pound test?
6 pounds.
6 pounds.
6 pound test was
A
what I was
that's the
running.
leader? Or did you just run straight 6 pound at the time?
No, I was running 8 pound main line
Okay.
and 6 pound leader.
Right. And at the time that was prior to fluorocarbon, right?
Right.
That was all just
That's all
monofilament.
monofilament.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. How long of rods were you using?
Even then, I was using 10-foot rods.
10 foot.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No. Actually, I bought a rod from Swan.
Okay.
And started using it, and then there was all fiberglass rods
Yep.
at those times.
At the time, yeah.
I was one of the last guys to go to graphite.
Yeah.
I really was. I was. It's like I'm one of the last guys on the river now that uses a prop motor. And I haven't gone to
I was going to ask you about that because in a day of outboard jets for anybody who runs the rivers, they're shallow. There's spots where it's shallow, so guys run an outboard jet rather than a prop to basically be able to go through the shallow waters without damaging the lower unit. Well, yeah, you are one of the old school guys that still runs a prop. That it amazes me that
I could get
you do
along as well as
yeah,
I do.
I see you in positions and spots that anybody with a a jet is running. And do you do that just out of stubbornness, or is it just because you just feel the confident that, like, hey, I've been doing this forever?
Right, that's a little bit of it. But I try to make one boat satisfy all my fishing needs, and so the
Right.
boat I use right now, I got in '03.
Okay.
And it's been a super boat. It's a welded boat.
Okay.
Up until then, I went through a couple Lunds that were
Okay.
riveted boats.
Yep.
And seeing how I fished all winter long, that the bounding on the expansion joints on the highway just ruined them.
Just
the
rattled them to
rivets.
death.
Just rattled them rivets to death. And,
Yeah.
And so but once I got this welded a boat, it has really been a nice one. And then I use that boat in Saginaw Bay, and I use it for, Houghton Lake walleye fishing, and so I could make one boat satisfy all my fishing needs.
Yeah, you're not like a specific boat for a specific fish,
right.
and
I got lots of friends that have multiple boats.
Right, a boat for every thing they fish for, I guess.
Right.
So yeah, no, that makes sense. Like if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right?
That's worked for me.
Yeah,
but it don't work for anybody.
Right, yeah. So, when you got that boat, did you quit fishing, wader fishing?
Yes.
Yeah.
I've never wadered fish since then. Nope.
So
once I got the boat, I transferred over to boat fishing, and for the first 18 years or so, I put in at Bear Creek every time I fished.
Okay.
And then Nate Kiefer kind of talked me into it. Got to be quite an area that got heavily fished, and a lot of charter captains were working out of that area. And he told me, Sharpie, he says, you'll be better off going out of Manistee, the lower river.
Yep.
And so I made the transition down there, and now there's the fishable water down there isn't the same as up above there.
Yeah, it's just
holes,
different. Yeah.
It's different. But I do have a lot less boat traffic and a lot less competition down there than I had at Bear Creek. So
yeah. And that was probably in what, late 90s, early 2000s that you kind of made that transition?
Right, I did.
Yeah.
About 2010, actually. 2008 or 10.
Yeah.
In that area.
The people traffic just got to be crazy.
And then in 05, then I retired from teaching, and we've spent all our winters in Florida.
Right.
So I don't winter fish anymore. But I was winter fishing all winter long.
Yeah. How many times a week did you go fishing when you were up still here in Michigan throughout the winter?
Basically once, usually on Saturday I would fish, and then snow days.
Yep.
I was a school teacher, and during snow days I had an 18-year stretch there that if school was called off in Clare, I was fishing on the Manistee River.
So you were hoping for a snow day to happen.
Yes.
That's funny. And I've only known you really to just fish by yourself. I mean, for the most part, I've seen you with a couple guys just a handful of times in the entire time we've known each other.
Times.
Yeah. Was there like a reason for that, or did you just?
There wasn't a reason for that. I get along well with people and everything, but I don't know. I was, I didn't want to have to either wait for somebody to show up, and then I could come and go as I wanted, and not be dependent on I got to be home by this time, and I would only go when I had the time, and so then, but there was, I'm not sure why I spent most of those days, or a lot of those days, about
just fishing by yourself with your dog.
I usually have had a dog.
Yeah. For as long as I've known you to fish up on that river, you've always had a dog with you, whether it be a golden retriever or your new dog that you've got right now, Golden Doodle. So make pretty good fishing mates.
They make good fishing buddies.
They never talk back or tell you, "Hey, I gotta get home."
Yep,
that's funny. So I guess with that being said, what's your techniques? Do you have a favorite technique that you like?
Basically, I'm a spawn fisherman.
Okay.
Basically, I'm a spawn fisherman, especially now that I'm only fishing basically the fall of the year. I don't.
Sure.
When I get home from Florida, there's still fish steelhead in the river, but I will not go up and fish bedded fish or spawned out steelhead.
Right.
And so basically I'm a spawn fisherman at this point in time. Now, back when I was fishing year round, there was always a time in December or late November that the water would cool down, and then I would switch over to wigglers.
Okay.
And basically fish wigglers all winter long.
Sure.
But now the boys have really gravitated to beads. And waxworms and jigs.
Yep.
Those two, if you're not fishing beads or waxworms and jigs in the wintertime on the Manistee River now, you are out of the ballpark.
You're out of,
And so, but I still basically am a spawn fisherman.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, if you've had success with it, and it's kind of another same thing along the lines with the boat. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know, no sense in. I mean, it's always good to have the tools in your toolbox. You know, whether it's beads, jigs, wax worms. You know, it's all good. But I mean, you're really, I think, with steelhead and probably all fishing, if you're confident in what you're fishing, you're going to catch fish.
Yes, that's exactly right. I used to tell my son that I could literally will a fish on the end of the line. He'd look at me like, "No, Dad, that's kind of..." but anyway.
I think you're full of shit, Dad.
Basically, if you don't have confidence, your chances of catching fish are not real good.
Yeah, it's all about visualization.
Right.
Yeah. And time on the water, too.
Time on the water.
Yeah.
Boy.
Yeah. How long did it take you to kind of learn those stretches?
Actually, and it's still true today, that there's other people that find fish better than I do.
Sure.
But you put fish in front of me, and I'll figure out a way to catch them.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. Now, actually, I learned most of my spots by watching guides.
Sure.
And not only that, it's pretty intricate so they're parked here, but that doesn't mean that you can park in that general area.
Right.
Every hole, every run's got its sweet spot.
Right.
And if you're not in that sweet spot,
your percentages of catching a fish are going to go down. Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's like spots within spots.
Right.
You know, I mean, you can have a run or whether it be a tail out or a hole. There's always something within there. Maybe there's a log within that spot, or even a stick, or just a little imperfection in the river bottom. Yeah, that a fish will just kind of gravitate to. So yeah, are you more of a bobber fisherman than a
there again, bottom
bouncer?
Bouncers.
Yeah,
I basically am a bottom bouncer now. Now, there again, the minute, like late in the season, there's a time to start running the bobber.
Right.
And then bobbers are usually a 100%.
Yeah.
That's what your go-to. The water temperature dictates that.
Sure.
Because we're in October, November, those fish will move to pick up food or
right.
bait.
They're more aggressive. Right.
As the water cools down, your fish lay there. They will not. They might move their head, but they're not moving a foot to pick up a bait.
Right.
So when you cast, you start in a certain run, and then you move. Every time you make a cast, you either shorten it up a foot or so forth. So you're working, and unless that bait's going straight down through there,
right,
they won't pick it up. I proved that to my son Chad more than once, and he was very reluctant because it takes different feel or technique to run a bobber and learn to keep your line out of the water so you don't have drift
big
on
belly.
it and so forth. And so he was, and I told him, I says, you fish this run, and I just sat and watched him. I says, okay, time for Dad, and I'd pick up fish. He'd just shake his head. he says that shouldn't be the way.
That's not how it works. I
But-
fished right through there. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
I guess for those that don't know the difference between bottom bouncing and bobber fishing, bottom bouncing is where you would basically get your lure right on the bottom of the river, and you'd have enough weight on there to where you would just kind of tick it along the bottom.
and then it swings.
Right. Yep.
Right. When you cast here, it's moving all the time, all the way around. And
Yeah.
then in bobber fishing, your line goes straight down
Straight
the
down.
river.
Yep.
The
Yeah.
whole length of it.
Yeah, so I think the difference with bottom bouncing is more of probably a noon to 4 drift,
Right.
whereas a bobber fishing is probably more of maybe a 10 to 4 or
Right.
10 to 2.
You
You
can
know,
extend it.
yeah,
for
you can
sure.
extend it, and so your go-to is primarily, as far as equipment goes, you're still a spin cast fisherman.
You're right, and I'm telling you what, the center pin boys they've taken over the river.
Yeah, again, going
because there's absolutely no drag on your line.
Right.
You know, I'm pretty good at running it off the
opening
reel,
the bail. Yeah.
But these center pin guys, I don't know whether they are more on the river, their skill level is better. I'm not sure. But I know one thing, a guy that's used a center pin reel and is he'll outfish me
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I know that.
Yeah. So
I would, if I was, on the river or all winter long like I used to, I would certainly switch.
Sure.
I wouldn't do what I'm doing.
Yeah. Yeah. So I mean, again, going back to somebody who is really unfamiliar with steelhead fishing, we're talking about a spin cast, which is your typical spin cast reel. A center pin reel is basically, it's just kind of like a big
Open fly
It's just
reel.
a big open fly reel. There's no drag to it. It's just a bearing, and when you cast it, it flows with whatever the flow of the river is. You can't necessarily. Well, I mean, I guess you can kind of manipulate the speed of it, but really, what you want to mimic is the speed of the flow of the river, which is more of a natural presentation. So, I mean, sometimes when you have drag, it doesn't look natural, and you may or may not. You may or may not catch that fish that's sitting right there just because of the way the presentation is, whether that's spawn or jigs and waxies or wigglers or even a bead. So, I mean, there's a big difference. And I know a lot of guys are kind of doing something a little bit more, I'd call it hybrid, where they're using a level wind,
Right.
a bait caster.
Especially people that feed it out the back of the boat.
Right. Yep.
They can push the button, and
it free spools like a center pin almost would.
Almost as good as a center pin, but not quite.
Right. But the retrieve on a bait caster is 10.
It's always that's a single on a center pin. It's a single
it's a 1-to-1. It's a
revolution.
1-to-1 ratio. Like one turn of the reel is one rotation.
And the other casting reel could be up to 6-to-1
Right.
turns.
Right. So the retrieve on it is just a lot faster with, say, a spin cast or a bait caster in comparison to a center pin. So there's definitely trade-offs there. So, how do you, when you go to the river, how do you break down the water? What are you looking for?
Structure.
Okay.
It's all, structure fishing, whether you're in a lake or whether you're in the river or wherever you are. Fish relate to structure.
Okay.
So, and it don't have to be wood.
Right.
Now, wood is part of it.
Sure.
But holes, and then each hole has, the current carves out different areas.
Right.
And so, but they're going to be laying somewhere in that structure.
Yeah.
And all the good fishermen can read water, is
Right.
what we call read water.
Yep.
You can visualize how the current's going through certain areas.
Sure.
And you'll know where those fish are holding.
Does depth have anything to do with that?
Not fish will lay in 3 foot of water,
Right.
or 8 foot of water,
Right.
in the river. You're talking, that type of, but they need cover,
Yeah.
and so wood is important, and different levels of water.
Sure.
Are important.
Oxygen, I think, plays a pretty big role in that too.
Especially certain times of year.
I was gonna say, and it's always certain times of the years. More in the fall, you'd probably be fishing more of what I would consider what they call tailouts.
That's right.
Shallower water, the fish are more active in there. They're looking for, bait
Food.
coming down, food coming down. I guess if a fall steelhead's coming in, they're coming in primarily to catch all the loose eggs from the salmon that have spawned in the fall. And then, as the water gets colder, they transition more into the deeper waters.
Certainly.
The deeper, slower runs.
Certainly.
So
Yep.
there is a game within a game, I guess, when it comes to, the seasons of the steelhead and stuff. So,
Yep, that's true.
yeah. What, do you got any cool stories that you'd be willing to share as far as like maybe some of your favorite trips that you've been on? Some of your maybe worst days and best days?
Yeah, they're all good.
They're all any
If
day
you're
on the river is good.
they're all good.
I love that. Yeah, that's awesome.
But there's days that I've been there in basically total whiteouts, and I mean the snowflakes are so big.
It's like a snowball hitting you.
Right, and it's just so intriguing to watch that bobber. Usually
Right.
you're fishing bobbers in the winter.
Yep.
And those type of things. I haven't really the days that you've got a school laying in front
Right.
of you and a pot of fish that you're working on, and you know exactly, get the fish in the boat, make the next cast, and you can anticipate another one.
Yeah.
Those type of experiences, they don't happen all the time.
Right.
Especially steelhead fishing. It's I've heard stories. It's a fish of 1,000 casts.
Yeah, kind of like a muskie. Yeah, sometimes even more than 1,000 casts. I know that feeling.
And but those type of experiences, I tell people that that's my environment. That's where I like to be.
Right.
And if you don't like to be there, you won't have enough patience or go enough to learn the water.
Right.
So that's, to me, that's where I get into my own space, and I can get away from, when I'm on that river, your concentration is dealing, and then there's so much going on. There's a lot of wildlife in our area.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I'm seeing deer, ducks, and geese, and eagles, and if you're not enjoying the whole part of your fishing experience,
right.
you're not going to spend enough time there to be a decent fisherman.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
I totally agree with you. I mean, the fishing part of it is great. Like, that's the bonus part to me.
Right.
I mean, I just love being up on the river myself.
I do too.
Did you ever fish any other rivers?
The thing is, when I first started steelhead fishing, and I'd go talk to my neighbor, Dick Swan, he would say, well, there's a run at the Rogue, or there's a run on the Asable, or the fish are really hitting good at the Betsy.
Yeah.
And so I would run around to those different spots.
Right.
And by the time I got there, he'd tell me, and on Thursday, by the time I could get there on Saturday, it was all over.
Yeah, you were a day late.
And so I didn't do that too many years. I did it a year or two.
Yeah.
I finally found out the best thing for me to do is spend 100% of my time on the big Manistee River.
Yeah.
Learn it, know it well, and it will always hold fish.
Right.
From the start of October right through the winter, there will be fish in the Manistee River, and my success rate really jumped up when I I spent my total amount of time on the big river.
Well, you just understood that river.
Right.
You knew the spots.
Right.
You knew the holes.
I
You knew how the
knew it.
water flowed. I mean, you pretty much had it dialed in. So,
I had it dialed in.
yeah, I think a lot of people get caught up in chasing the fish, and sometimes, they bounce. They just bounce. And I'm even guilty of it. I was always bouncing around when I was more of a wader fisherman and trying to just find the fish. And like you said, your percentages go down when you spread that percentage of rivers out and
Right.
what you have to learn, because each river is a little bit different in how it flows and how the fish set up. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Boy.
that makes a lot of sense.
So,
How do you, I guess nowadays, because to me, steelhead fishing has gained a lot of popularity.
oh man.
I mean, we can both agree that the number of steelhead fishermen on the river nowadays it's crazy.
Crazy.
I mean, and that's a good thing, I guess.
And-
it's good and bad all the same.
And I find that I worked all those years, 39 years teaching school, to get to fish not on weekends but during the week.
Right.
I wonder, does anybody work anymore? if you go on a Monday, Tuesday, there are people all the time.
There's all the time. It's crazy.
More charter captains. Everybody wants to be a charter captain
Right,
nowadays.
right.
Of course, I guess it's a good life. Now, I did have a little experience about charter fishing. When I retired, I thought, well, nobody's in the front seat of that boat.
Right.
I'll take them.
Try it out.
But I don't want to give up my fishing, so I'll charge them only half about what
Sure.
they pay a regular guy.
Sure.
But they would be guaranteed they would be fishing in front of fish.
Right.
I could have provide the bait or whatever.
Sure.
Well, I had 7 clients lined up, and by the time I was done with the 6th one, I called the 7th one and said, "Charter's canceled. Sorry." And I was done because I was supposed to be taking experienced fishermen and so forth,
Yeah.
but they didn't have the time to,
Right.
And I found out that, boy, you're babysitting, and I didn't like babysitting.
You spent your entire life somewhat babysitting when you were a teacher.
That's right.
And I'll be damned if you're going to do it as a retired.
I wasn't going to do it.
I don't blame
So
you there.
that ended my.
That was
and
your
I had
short-term-
no desire to be a fishing guide.
I'll be damned.
It,
I never knew that. I didn't know that you were ever even considered it.
I at one time had kind of considered it, but anyway,
That was
it didn't take long for me to get out
realize,
of the guiding business, boy. 'cause
this isn't my thing. So
it wasn't my thing. You got to be almost an extrovert, and you got to be talking constantly.
yeah,
And anybody that knew me, when I'm on that river, unless I got a fish or two in the boat, you aren't going to talk to me because I'm busy.
yeah. The
concentrating.
concentration level is at 110%. So yeah.
But anyway.
That's funny. I give the guys credit that are guides. I mean, but
man.
the amount of them that are out there nowadays, it's insane. I don't know how they can. I don't know how they can make it.
I don't
Because
either.
the amount of fish to me isn't there like it used to be.
Oh, that's for sure.
Yeah,
Boy.
it's not there like it used to be. That's funny. So, you ever have any scary moments fishing on your own?
Yeah.
A couple times.
I haven't until this year. I've had friends that their wives wouldn't let them go alone.
Sure.
Because of the dangers, and of course
Yeah.
I was fishing all winter long, all those years,
Right.
and never once did I ever feel like things, I might get in trouble. Ever.
Right.
But anyway, this year, I was going up the river. Actually, there was another boat coming down river, and I knew the river quite well.
Sure.
And anyway, I moved over, and I wasn't going real fast. I wasn't up on plane when
Sure.
I was on plane, and then I dropped down when I saw him because I knew we weren't, and it happened to be a DNR
Okay.
gentleman. And I hit a log in the river, and it spun my motor around, but I was taking on water over the transom
Oh my
of the
gosh.
boat, and I couldn't, the boat was going in a circle, and I couldn't get to the kill switch, and finally I grabbed the side of the boat, and I got back to the kill switch and got it shut down. Finally, I think I made 2 revolutions. And all that time,
Did it knock it out of your hand?
the tiller was out of my hand.
Oh, okay. And it's still under power.
Right, it was still under power.
Okay, jeez.
And then the DNR gentleman stopped. He knew I was in trouble.
Yeah.
And by the time I got then as soon as I hit the kill switch, the boat come
Popped up. Yeah.
and no more water was. But I had. It wouldn't have been long.
You would have sunk her.
I would have. The boat won't sink. But
Right.
I would have had enough boat that I had no control.
You'd have been in some trouble.
I'd have been, and he didn't. He was really reluctant to leave.
Sure.
He says, "Now you sure you're?" He says, I got the bills going,
Yep.
and I'm gonna be fine. But
Yeah.
that is the only time I've ever had a problem.
Really?
The only time I've ever had.
You had like an oh shit moment. This is not good. Wow.
Not good.
And that's got to be, you're going on 40 plus years.
That's right.
Wow. Well, that's
50 years.
Yeah, knock on wood. That's for sure.
The only time I've ever had a problem.
Yeah, because people have lost their lives on that river.
I've been in Saginaw Bay, hundreds of times with my boat, which is not a bay boat.
Right. Yeah, no.
But I don't press the weather conditions or the waves. And I've always been very careful, but that was the only time that I'd really
made you think a little bit. Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. Did you have the dog with you?
No, I did.
No.
Yeah, I did have the dog with me that day.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I did. Now this year, I heard a story I've been fishing walleyes at the Dow Dam over there on the Tittabawassee. And this year, it had been 2 or 3 weeks ago now, I had a guy tell me that he was on the river, hit a log, the boat spun, they were in a John boat.
Oh, boy.
And they both ended up in the water, and one guy didn't make it.
Yeah.
Right on the so that happens.
Those make you think for sure. And I think, honestly, they just found that guy.
Okay.
They found that guy this week.
All right.
Obviously, he passed away, which is really, really sad. But, it just kind of, it makes you think. Your awareness needs to be up all the time, especially on a river. Well, on any body of water,
In that time of year.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. Boy, you get into the cold time of year, you're going to get, you're going to go into shock.
Shock. You might not even get to hypothermia.
Right.
The shock of the.
Right.
So, but anyway, that's the
wild.
only time I've ever had any problems.
That's wild. Whatever. So, everybody talks about catch and release these days. You are not a catch and release guy.
I am not a catch and release person. I utilize all my fish.
Right.
I don't waste fish. I eat fish 2 to 3 times a week. And I smoke fish in season, like in the steelhead season. I fish one day, smoke one day, fish another day, and I utilize these smoked fish.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, I got friends like Nate Kiefer and Humphrey and all these guys I know on the river. They can spit out numbers like, I'm thinking, how in the heck do you Well, they go on the river at daylight. And They
Right.
don't get off the river till 4 or 5 in the afternoon. And I'm always have been. Of course, when I first started out, they had high water, and
Sure.
very few people fished high water, especially without a boat.
Right.
And so I'm basically a 4 or 5 hour fisherman.
Okay.
And not only that, if I got a fish or two, I don't feel obligated to spend the rest of my day on the
Searching
river.
for that.
And
Yeah.
so I do not catch fish in the numbers that I have
Sure.
friends that
Sure.
do. Man,
Sure.
they can
Yeah,
spend
but
up
like I said, you're eating every fish that you catch, which I
much.
mean, like,
either that or I give a few away
Yeah.
or I give some away. But right,
Yeah.
I won't spend the energy and the money to fish, catch, and release.
hey, listen, I got no issues with that because I just had some of your smoked steelhead that you caught the other day, and that was freaking phenomenal. So, I mean, I love catching fish. I love eating fish, and I mean, I'll never be that guy that, I don't know. Yeah, like, I release them. I have.
Right.
It just depends, you
You
know.
guys
But like,
do a lot.
yeah, but like you said, if you're only up there for X amount of hours a day and you want to fish dinner, well, what the hell are we doing here, right?
That's my theory.
What's your favorite way of cooking them?
Basically, big fish or salmon, I smoke.
Okay.
And I use a brine that is really basic.
Yeah.
It's just a cup of water.
Sure.
Or not a cup of water, a cup of salt and a cup of brown sugar, a teaspoonful of garlic powder and a
Okay.
teaspoonful of onion powder,
Yep.
and 8 cups of water.
Okay.
And that's your brine. And I leave the fish in the brine for 10 to 12 hours, and then I rinse them and put them on racks, and then I smoke them at about 170
Okay.
for 3 hours. Everything depends. You can't just, it's not cut and dried, because weather conditions, I'm smoking fish in 28-degree weather, I'm smoking fish in 60-degree weather. So weather depends on how long it takes
Sure.
for your cooker,
Sure.
or for your smoker to work. And then not only that, but if you only have 1 rack of fish in there, or you got 4 racks of fish in there, that affects the time. You
Right.
wouldn't think it would. They're all in the same box and everything.
Right.
But it does. It affects the time. So after I just open the door, see where we are, put a little more
Sure.
chips on the smoke, and I'm by eyesight now. I know exactly
Yeah.
when they're done.
You've been doing
And-
it long enough.
right?
Yeah.
So, and then I pan fry, walleyes and bluegills,
Yep.
and I pan fry them, and I use a lemon pepper and a little garlic powder,
Okay.
and a hot skillet, and it's almost blackening them.
Sure.
I get them pretty brown on
Yep.
one side before I flip them,
Yeah.
and it don't take long.
Right.
And then I also have a deep fryer.
Yep.
And the more number of people I'm feeding, the deep fryer comes into.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can cook a
You
lot
can cook a lot of fish in a short period of time.
In a
Yeah.
short period of time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
if I'm more than four people, mostly I
The deep fryer's going.
The deep fryer's going, and that's really important that you keep. You cannot deep fry without a thermometer,
Right.
because it's really important that your oil has to be at 350 to 360. If it gets to 380, you're gonna burn it.
Yep.
And so you gotta pay attention, and you don't ever want to put. I use that thermometer, and before I put the second batch in, because if you just start, it's all hot now,
Yep.
and you start throwing them in, dumping them out,
Yeah.
your oil's not going to
gonna cool.
maintain.
Yep.
And so to make sure you got consistent fish, you have to use that thermometer every time, all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's basically my fishing.
Yeah.
how I do
So
it.
I'm gonna I'm gonna ask you about one thing, and this is my favorite thing that you've ever made for me was your fish dip, your
Okay.
smoked fish dip.
Right. Okay.
So-
Hilda, my wife, is in charge of that. It's 2 cups of fish, and I cut it. Now I was cutting them in pretty much. You want a little nugget there.
Sure.
But
And that's
she
smoked
uses
fish? Is that
cream-
smoked fish?
That's smoked fish.
Yeah, you're using smoked
I'm
fish.
using
Okay.
smoked fish, and then she finishes the dip, and it's Philadelphia cream cheese,
Yeah.
and I'm not sure what else.
Yeah.
She's in charge of that.
Yeah.
But she can make
Oh, buddy.
good fish dip.
That stuff
But-
shows up, and I will just sit down and I'll just grab the whole bowl myself and eat it. I know I've ate it multiple times. I love it, and I've shared the recipe out, and everybody that I've ever shared it with has been like, "This is really, really good.
Yeah.
Really, really good." So I guess, with all these years experience that you've been on the river going on 50 years right now.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know anybody else that's honestly, don't know anybody else in the state of Michigan that's fishing as many years as you've been fishing. I mean, you're 81 years old. You're by far the elder statesman when it comes to the river fishing. I mean, I would probably wear that crown if I were you.
Well, let's hope I can wear it, in the future.
Let's
a
keep
few
it
more
rolling.
years. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just, I've been really fortunate with my health.
Yeah.
And, and I feel well, and I'm going to continue as long as
right?
I can.
As long as you can
physically do
get
it.
there, right?
And,
right.
People wonder why I used to be a jogger.
Yeah.
And I'd tell them, well, you got to, stay in shape for fishing and
Right.
hunting, and they'd look at me, and now I'm no longer able to jog, but
Right.
I can walk.
Still do the walking.
and I still, and that gives me enough energy, and
Sure.
I'm in good physical condition.
Right.
And let me tell you, fishing's not easy.
No.
You fish with me, you're not going to sit in the boat.
No. Yeah.
I mean, you're in the boat, but unless that boat's under power, I
You're
stand.
standing.
I
Yep.
stand the whole time. I learned
Yeah.
bank fishing. I learned how to fish, hold the rod, feel
Yep.
the rod,
Yep.
and if it's all feel and everything.
Sure.
And if I had to sit down and fish, I probably would quit fishing.
Sure.
It's not.
You almost feel
and I
handicapped when
do
you fish
some-
that way.
I do some trolling on Saginaw Bay.
Yeah.
But there again, that you're not fishing.
Yeah, you're just dragging.
You're just when you got lines out, you got planer boards out
Right.
and stuff. You're not fishing.
Right.
That's not fishing unless you've got that rod in your hand and you're
Right.
controlling everything that goes on with that.
Right.
You're not fishing. You're just dragging
You're
baits.
just dragging
and hoping
baits.
Something
Yeah.
bites.
Yeah. You're just getting lures wet.
That's why I'm not a real good open water fisherman.
Yeah.
I'm basically a river fisherman.
You're a river rat.
But I do spend time because the season isn't.
Yeah. It's seasonal.
It's seasonal.
Yeah.
But anyway.
So have you had any advice to give somebody that was just getting into, say, steelhead or salmon fishing, dealing with crowds and all the new techniques and stuff like that? I guess what would be like one of your best pieces of advice that you could give somebody?
Hire a guide.
Yeah.
Hire a guide. And I could recommend some real
Sure.
fine people.
Oh, yeah.
And they could, what it took me all those years to learn, they could cut your learning curve down real quick.
Yeah.
If you were observant and asked I found that with Dick Swan. He was a great, and he would answer every question I asked him honestly.
Sure.
But you got to ask the right questions.
Sure.
That's the whole key. If you don't ask, and he can't sit there and while he's working and explain to you, how you cast this thing out and
Right.
how far upriver you cast, and of course that relates on how everything goes through the water.
Sure.
But if you ask him the right questions, everybody is going to give you an honest answer.
Yeah.
But you got to be able, if you're not familiar enough with what you're doing, I mean, you're really a neophyte, you know.
Right.
Well, you're only going to gain certain amount of knowledge each
Right.
time. As you spend more time doing things, you'll ask the right questions, and
Yep.
and people are more than willing to help you. But you got to ask them
Sure.
the question to get them,
To get
on
that
the
answer.
right track
Yeah.
of what's going on. So
No, and
I learned that from Swan. He would answer, but you got to ask him the right questions, or
Sure.
he can't help you a
He-
bit. He
he-
might
yeah.
be full of knowledge.
But yeah, unless
But-
you bring it out and ask those
Right.
questions, they can't think of
Just-
everything to tell
right.
you.
That's right.
Yeah,
So-
no, I totally agree with you on that aspect. I mean, I could only imagine what the learning curve would have been shortened to if even in my case, and in your case, obviously, if we would have had a guide when we
Oh,
first started,
shoot.
holy crap,
Right.
we'd have cut minimum 5 years of learning off.
Right.
So, I
That'd
mean,
be my advice,
yeah.
boy. I got
Yeah.
some good guys that could really shorten your learning curve.
Yeah, for sure.
And especially if you could ask the right questions, boy.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, you wouldn't take too many trips.
no.
Especially on any given river.
Sure.
You know,
Yeah.
all rivers are different. So.
Right.
But
right.
that'd be my advice.
That's
is
a great
to-
piece of advice for sure for anybody wanting to get into it. So,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, listen, I appreciate your time today.
Hey, no,
We're about an hour into it, a little longer. So, I mean, it's been great conversation.
Right.
I love
I've-
talking to you, and
I've enjoyed it very much,
Yeah.
by golly.
yeah. Well, maybe this time next year we could talk about it again.
Okay. I'm honored that you wanted to
All right.
talk to me.
Well, yeah.
by
I
golly.
mean, I love doing this stuff. I love sharing stories, and I mean, I want people to kind of listen to, not necessarily from a present standpoint, but a past standpoint on, what like you
Things
dealt
were
with
years ago.
Yeah, because it was different. It was different.
Oh, certainly.
I don't
I'll be
necess-
the first to admit.
Yeah.
that,
Whether it
boy,
was
there's
good,
just-
bad, or otherwise, it was different.
At one time, I was pretty good fisherman on that river, but I couldn't hold the candles. Some of these guys
Yeah.
right now, I
Yeah.
know that, boy.
Yeah, there is. I will have to admit that even when we first started, there was a lot of people on the river, but they weren't necessarily great fishermen.
Right.
Nowadays, anybody that's running these rivers, they've spent the money, they've took the time to learn, and they are very, very good with a rod and reel in
Yes,
their
they-
hand.
they
So I
are.
mean, the competition has definitely upped the game.
I agree with you 100%, boy.
Yeah. So all right. Well,
Yep.
listen, I appreciate everybody listening in. I hope you guys all enjoy it. If you get a chance, leave a 5-star rating and maybe leave a comment if this is something that you guys enjoyed. And Roger, thanks again. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
All right, guys, have a great day. We'll talk to you all soon. This is the Mic'd Up Outdoor Podcast. Take care.